that the reason a lot of people choose medical aid in dying, or better described and more truly described as physician-assisted suicide, how some of the big motivators are not pain, are not actual suffering, but are fears of suffering, fear of loneliness, or feeling that they don't have options, or not having enough resources to be able to live their lives, whether it's to pay rent or to pay for a wheelchair. So people are kind of being funneled into assisted suicide because they don't have community and they don't have support and they don't have other options. So it turns out that our home is actually really important for that aspect.
Are you walking through a storm that feels like it will never end? Do you wonder if life's storms have stolen the beauty from your life for good? You're in the right place. My name is Heather, and like you, I've been through a storm or two and wondered if life would ever be beautiful again. Here we share warriors' words, stories of discovering beauty after battles, and the worth in your wounds. Pick up your sword or boxing gloves and join the battle. Your words are powerful, my friends. Make them warrior words. Welcome, warriors. Miles believes that people nearing death deserve a community and love without cost. He is the founder and director of a nonprofit hospice home in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He's a registered nurse with a strong foundation of care from his local Veterans Administrative Hospital. Over the last year, he's journeyed with nearly 80 individuals alongside their families through one of the hardest times of their lives, dying. Now, before we hear from Miles, one of my affiliates is First Form, and they have released some wonderful summer flavors, including lemonade summer and pink splash non-carbonated energy drinks, as well as strawberry smash cake protein bars and key lime clear protein. Now, if you happen to be listening to this episode after the summer, you can still check out all their delicious flavors and their regular lines, and my faves are pretty much anything with caramel. So check out First Form's link in my show notes. Now, grab a tissue and join Miles and me as he shares his experience with caring for those at the end of their lives and why it is such an important time of life. Let's rock. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Warrior Words podcast. We are blessed to have Miles Gloetzner here with us today. Welcome to the podcast, Miles.
Thanks, Heather. It is so good to be here. I'm really excited about this conversation we're about to have. It's different. It's a topic that we don't often think about or maybe even avoid. So
yes,
thanks for inviting me to your show.
Well, I appreciate that. And you're right. It is a different kind of topic. Normally, our guests start out with some sort of story about a struggle or a trauma that they've personally experienced. But you are here kind of to talk about some struggles that other people experience and that you have chosen to help them, I guess, help them with or help them experience with dignity. And so your organization is Inhora. Did I get that right?
You got it. Nailed
okay.
it.
So tell everybody what Inhora is and why you started it.
Okay, so I am based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Inhora is a end-of-life home. So those in their last days to weeks of life, instead of dying in a hospital or dying alone in their homes, or in New Mexico, dying on the streets for those that are unhoused among us, we decided to come up with another option, a nonprofit, free of charge home for those people. So, historically, people have always lived that end of life experience in community. It's a fairly new thing that people are going to institutions at the end of life. But we wanted to bring that back, to humanize the experience and bring that dignity, like you mentioned, right here. So we have a home, a physical location where up to 3 people can take residence. And we've cared for people as short as 2 hours
Oh, wow.
of their life. And in others, 30 days. Our average is a week. The longest we've cared for somebody was 102 days.
Oh, wow.
So just to give you an idea, and it's totally free of charge. We don't bill insurance. We're not part of the medical system. Hospices, if for those who are familiar with an experience or have had an experience in hospice, how hospice goes to the person's home and provides the care. That's still the case in our home. So it's a home away from home for our guests.
Yeah, I recently had a family member and a friend who experienced, or well, one of them actually experienced the hospice route, and the other one, unfortunately, she passed before she could make it to hospice, and that was one of her fears was dying alone. And as Catholics, we don't believe that people are alone at the hour of death, but she expressed, physically being alone. She wanted family around her. And that was one of the things I think that made me most sad about that experience for her. And so I'm glad to hear that there's at least one organization that is trying to help and trying to provide that dignity to people who are, gosh, like you said, 2 hours away from death or, a couple months away. So,
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to just kind of piggyback on your comment about the physical aspect of being physically present, because that, especially as Catholics, we have the greater understanding that our physical bodies are good and the material world is good, and a church, a community can't be replaced virtually,
right.
in particular. So there is something about being physically available and present at any time of life, but then at the end, it's that physical communion that we're able to have with another person, which can dignify that whole experience and make it more bearable, more humane, more sacred and divine. So I think that's a beautiful observation, and what a loss. And I wish we could say that that was rarer, that people are dying alone like that. But it's for that exact reason that homes like this exist. And thankfully, there are over 50 homes like this around the US,
Oh, wow.
and that number
Okay.
is growing. Yeah, yeah. So there's a network that links these homes. It's called the Omega Home Network. Omega, like the last alphabet in Greek.
Okay.
It's non-faith based. There's quite a diversity of styles of homes. Um, and it's just such a blessing to be part of this network. In fact, we just hosted, although we're only 1 year old, we just hosted the national conference for the Omega Home Network here in New Mexico. It was just a fantastic gathering of just great people who are wanting to change these end of life stories so that they are beautiful, so that they are communal, and
Hmm.
not something that's over medicalized, over institutionalized, but has that sense of that physical communion and togetherness.
Well, what you've said so far has sparked two questions for me. So I'm going to start at the one that's kind of most beginning, and that is, what made you want to start something like this? Because I believe you have a medical background,
I'm an RN. I'm a registered nurse, and
right?
all of my nursing has been within our local Veterans Administrative Hospital
Hmm.
and system, which was fantastic. I never thought I would leave. And it literally did take God and a calling to step out of it. I was at the VA for 11 years until I launched into this. And I had no hospice experience. I had no personal end of life experience that triggered me to do something about it, with a family member or loved one. It was literally waking up in the middle of the night, having the idea and it just flowing through me, writing it down, um, and then letting it percolate for about a year and a half
Yeah.
before I made the decision and said yes. And that was September 15th, the Feast of Our Lady of Sorrows, which I didn't even know at the
Oh,
time.
wow.
But that was the day I said, yeah, I said, yes, Lord, here we go. I'll do it. No experience, new kid on the block, and God has just made it this incredible mission and beacon and bridge building organization. So,
Well, that actually leads directly into that second question that I mentioned, and that is, since you didn't have a whole lot of experience, or you said actually no experience in the end of life and hospice style, how did you know what services to provide? And are you still providing the same services that you started out with a year ago?
oh, great question. When I woke up in the middle of that night, I did not know that a home like this was needed. I didn't know that there were other homes like it. It wasn't until that year and a half later that I learned about the Omega Home Network, which was just an awesome, awesome discovery that just bolstered um, the reality of that dream and helped me to make it a reality, for lack of a better word. So, um, as that idea percolated over that year and a half, I started to see just how important the pro-life at the end of life topic was and how neglected it had been. You know, caring for people at the end of life has always been something that the Christian people have done. Um, and we've just kind of lost it through the over medicalizing of things in the United States in particular over the last 100 or so years. Um, so it's really a return to what Christians have always done. Um, and I knew that there wasn't a home like it. I just didn't realize how great the need was. And as I investigated it a bit more, I started to learn things like that the reason a lot of people choose medical aid in dying, or um, better described and more truly described as physician assisted suicide, how some of the big motivators are not pain, are not um, actual suffering, but are fears of suffering, fear of loneliness, or feeling that they don't have options, or not having enough resources to be able to live their lives, whether it's to pay rent or to pay for a wheelchair. So people are kind of being funneled into assisted suicide because they don't have community and they don't have support and they don't have other options. So it turns out that our home is actually really important for that aspect. Um,
That makes a lot of sense because what you hear about in the news and social media and things like that is that the main reason is pain and
and that's just,
suffering.
yeah,
And if I mean maybe, and I don't like to be judgmental, but maybe I guess if the reason got out that it was mostly fear and being alone, that doesn't fit with what they're selling, I guess, is maybe that's what
that's
jumps out to
well,
me. Yeah.
no, you nailed it. It's an industry and it is profitable, and there is a lot of even donations going to nonprofits like end of life options, or so it is being sold that it's to alleviate pain. And the other thing that it's important to know is it is not the only option to alleviate pain, actual physical pain, which is a much lesser number statistically of people who are choosing it. Um, but for those that do, there's also a last resort measure, which is called palliative sedation. And for us as Catholics, it's permissible. It's not suicide. What it
Mm,
is it's recognizing that our medicine hasn't quite gotten to the point where we can appropriately treat all types of pain.
right.
So we can sedate a person to the point that it relieves the pain, but it's also going to put them to sleep and they're not going to wake up again. But it's not increasing the dose after they fall asleep. It's keeping it steady, keeping them comfortable, because the focus is life. The focus is caring for the person, not killing the person, which is
Mm,
what physician assisted suicide is, or medical aid in dying. So as a final resort, there is palliative sedation as an option. And I just want to make sure that anyone listening to this knows that they don't have to suffer that excruciating pain. If you are one of those rare people that has that condition, there is an option, and you can continue living, but sleeping, and have that pain alleviated if you really need it. So
mm.
there are
Yeah.
options.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that because I was not aware that that was an option. So thank you for
Mhm.
that. So then, how do you help your? I don't know if you do. If you call them residents, how do you help the people that come and stay with you to offer them dignity? How do you serve? How do you serve these people and their families?
I love that. And I know I get off on a rant on the medical aid in dying. It's so strong. And that's definitely um, part of the mission, is to support people who would be choosing that otherwise by providing that community. And
Mhm.
this just fits right into your question, which is we're providing 24/7 care. We're providing a home away from home, and it's a beautiful home. We're providing human connection, food around the clock, and each room is private. So there's even a sleeper sofa in each of the rooms where family members can sleep, stay the night 24/7. We have no restrictions of visiting hours. So we're just this safe place that people can come and live their dying experience, that once in a lifetime experience to natural death, and just be um, supported by other humans. Just because somebody's dying doesn't mean they're not part of our community anymore. And especially as
Right.
Catholics, we realize not only does death not separate that communion, but dying doesn't separate that communion. And people at the end of life have value. They still
Yes.
have gifts to give. And Jesus tells us that whatever we do for some buddy who's sick, who's suffering, who's dying, we're actually doing it to him. So they're giving us a chance to meet God. When they're on
Right.
their deathbed, they're actually giving us the greatest gift we could ever ask for, which is a divine encounter. So we can meet God in the Eucharist, and we can meet him physically in the dying that we're touching and caring for and feeding and clothing and everything.
Yes, yes, I remember. It's one of my favorite passages in Matthew 25, I believe, where he talks about that. Yes. So
Mhm.
that is wonderful. And the phrase that you used that stood out to me was living their dying experience. And
Yeah.
that I think that those are powerful words put together right there. Simple but
Yes.
powerful. Yes. So
Yeah, they are. Go for it.
so I was just going to ask, I know we had talked about possible stories that you have. Is there one in particular that stands out to you where you got to experience God in someone's living out their dying experience?
Mhm. I would say that's a great question, and I would say if I'm not seeing God and experiencing God with every single person that comes through our doors, then that's because of my lack of faith and my lack of love and my lack of sight. It's not because something divine and miraculous isn't actually happening. It's just because of my sins or whatever it is, distractions that are keeping me from that experience. But I will tell some stories, and there's just so many and maybe I can even share a few, but I love telling the story of our first guest. His name was Gerald, and he was living along the Rio Grande River, which passes through Albuquerque,
Hmm.
in an area called the Bosque, which is, if anybody who's been around a river, there's a lot of trees that grow along that river, even in a desert.
Yeah.
So he lived among those trees and under a tarp with two of his sisters actually, but one in particular was really dear and near to him and was unhoused. So they were both unhoused, living out there. So not only that, he had a tracheostomy, so he was breathing out of the tube in his neck and needing suctioning of that as well. He got a cancer diagnosis, lung cancer, and was told he only had so long to live. So he was hospitalized. And while he was there, he told the discharge planners, which was really unusual. He said, usually it's the discharge planners that are trying to fit people and get them matched and are telling him what the criteria are. But this man gave them the criteria. He said, I'm only going to go somewhere if they'll take my sister too.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so we were brand new. So this was April a year ago, April 2025. And we said yes. They needed a home. They needed somebody to step in. They needed community. They needed a place where actually their extended family who were in the Albuquerque area could actually reconnect with them. And we became that. So both Gerald and his sister Dorothy moved into our home and became our first guests. Um, and Gerald lived with us his last 30 days of life, supported by not only our volunteers and staff, but also by his own family who loved him so much but could never express it or never call and connect. But because they had this place, this home, they were able to reconnect. And it was so beautiful seeing. I remember after he died, his grandchildren were part of actually washing his body, preparing him, doing that last act of love to his dead body there, just like Mary or Nicodemus or Joseph of Arimathea, caring for the Lord. So that was so powerful. And then the next day, the family gathered. There was about 30 of them. So they went from basically a family of three to a family of 30 of actual
Wow.
biological family members. And a priest came, and we had a home funeral. And the rosary was prayed. And um, it was something that you might experience at a funeral, but without all of the expenses. It was
Hmm.
in our home. We did the preparing of the body along with the family. We put him in the clothes that he wanted to be in, put the flowers there, the rosary there in his hands, and did all of that prep, and then the prayers and in that community. So
Oh, wow.
it was just so powerful and so amazing to be a part of. And that story would have been totally different if we weren't there, because he probably would have ended up at a nursing home, let's say at best, in an
Right.
ER or the street at worst. Um, so it was a totally different ending because of our home.
Wow. I have a couple tears.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. It's a
that is,
profound.
and to have that be your first experience, something so beautiful. I guess you kind of need those every once in a while, or maybe more often than that. It's motivation. There's a reason to what we are doing, and we are giving back. We're giving back to God, and we're sending people home with dignity, the dignity they deserve
Exactly.
as humans, as children of God. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll just point out quick on the side too, is similar in Mother Teresa's homes. Not all the volunteers are faith of any faith, actually.
Hmm.
So, and other ones are of diverse belief systems too, but all of us together under this umbrella of God's mission, is making a difference in people's lives, like Gerald. And actually, he wasn't the first one to die in our home, because he was the first one to come to our home. But then soon after he came, I think it was within a week, we had our next guest, and that was Sharon. Um, she went into our songbird room, which we had named because there was a art piece that had a lot of birds on it. It was just really pretty. So
Mm-hmm.
so she went in there, and we knew nothing about her when she came, except that she didn't have another option. But when the EMS came to transport her, she came by ambulance um, into our home, and they said that the reason that they were delayed, because she was about 2 hours late, an hour and a half later than expected, is because she was in the basement of a local facility with no elevator and narrow stairs. And Sharon was more obese, so a little more overweight too. But
Mm-hmm.
just given those settings, the EMS had to figure out how to get her up these stairs. Oh, and she was on an egg carton mattress, so like not even a great mattress, that was on the floor.
Wow.
So she went from that setting directly into our home, which had a, a beautiful space, real art in the room, and a totally different experience. So she was only with us overnight, though. We never heard a word from her. She came to us already having transitioned into that active dying stage, which normally lasts, less than 48 hours, more or less. So she was already at the very end. Um, and she struggled with pain. I remember being up with her all night that night, trying to get that um, under control, the moaning and just that difficulty, because she wasn't getting any of that management at that previous place. Um, and that's a place that is charging insurance and maybe even through private pay. And then
Wow.
here we are offering a free service without reimbursement, and she's actually treated like a human, with amazing ratios. I mean, even when it's one person in our home, it's one person to three. So,
Wow.
so she
Well,
had me with
yeah.
her all night, and we were able to
What?
get her under control. Did you get a question, or
No,
sorry?
I'm just thinking what you described from having an egg carton mattress on the floor. I mean, I don't even know that I can put egg carton and mattress as a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And to be on the floor and then to be able to be welcomed into your home and have a real bed and, like you said, have actual art on the walls. So it's a meaningful space and it's full of beauty. And she has someone there by her side throughout her pain and throughout the last hours of her life.
It was such an honor. It was so amazing having that time with her. It hurt. It hurt me to see her hurting.
Yeah.
That's something that I've learned through this and our other staff and volunteers, is sometimes it just hurts to be present, but it's so important and so powerful and sacred to remain there. And if we put that into perspective, that's Mary at the cross, and she's our model in our home of what it looks like to stand vigil while somebody is suffering. But yeah, so her story is she did get that, or we were able to get her pain under control. So by the morning, she was able to have that pain relieved and was at peace. And I was there in her room when she breathed her last, which was the first in the home. Um, and right after, there was this incredible peace and calm. And then within a few seconds, maybe 10 seconds, a chorus of birds started singing. It was just right out of
Oh,
her window.
wow.
And they were not there before. They just started singing her to heaven, I believe, or at least to
Yeah.
that next step.
Wow.
And
Gave me chills.
yes, it was profound. And then, so this woman did identify as lesbian. Her partner came um, a bit later, which we had no contact with before, but she came and she talked a little bit about how their relationship had been tumultuous. But one thing we learned is of all the rooms she went into and of all the experiences she could have had right after death, is she loved birds and would feed birds all the time. So that just
Oh,
made it all special.
to learn that
Mm,
after the, oh, wow.
right. That was just so
Oh,
powerful, so sweet that the Lord did that for her and that we could be part of that story. And then it turns out that she had a daughter too, and her daughter was able to come later in the day. And we're just relieved to know that she was in a home. I don't think anybody realized how dire her previous situation was. Maybe her partner, but I don't think her daughter could have realized because it was quite inhumane.
yeah.
But they didn't have to. In the end, they didn't have to be scary and bad because they were they were supported in their grief and in their loss. So, so that's something else. You know, we care for the people that are dying. Sometimes it's harder to care for the families and more intensive to care for them. And that's definitely a big aspect of what we do in the home too.
Well, I hadn't thought about this prior to having this conversation, but you mentioned that it can sometimes be difficult and painful on your end and your side, and then, having having it be a little bit more difficult to care for some of the family members. How do you and your staff, your volunteers, how do you care for your own mental health and how do you fill your own cup, I guess, so that you can bless others?
Yes. Yeah. For me, being the executive director and founder, I've made it a priority to care for the volunteers and staff. And honestly, this last year, to my expense, but at the same time, I would even bump it up a level and say at the Lord's expense, because despite the lack of time that I had for self care, the Lord's grace has definitely been sufficient. And we're around the corner now from hiring more people so that I don't have to work as many hours. So I would just say it's the Lord carried me as I did my best to carry and support the rest
Mhm.
of the team. So, but some other tools that we have within the home, we have got a book dedicated for stories for people to write down their experiences with the guests, their memories, the words that they heard or that they shared, or little miracles like that one with in that songbird room, where we can just kind of continue that storytelling. That there is something very therapeutic
Yes.
and cleansing of just getting that out, but it also helps us to remember the good, and for the times when it is just hard and difficult, also to find like the silver lining in those experiences. Um, so now we have a program director who is also overseeing like volunteer relations. So she tries to keep her finger on the pulse of the needs of the volunteers. We also just are completing, I almost said just completed, but we've got another 2 weeks left of doing a residency program through INELDA, which is a national end of life doula or death doula
Okay.
educator.
Mhm.
So it turned out that that organization wanted to pilot a residency program in our home of all homes, in being as young as we are. But we had the most amazing woman and still have a woman named Carmen who also would provide support. Um, she helped to develop some ceremonies around how to transition after a person dies to then often within hours or maybe one day then it being occupied by somebody different. So she helped us
Yeah.
to kind of hold space for that, to just to honor that experience that just happened. And then I really listened to, like, let's say, well, definitely to Rosas. So I remember this one time where our team, she just felt we were just pretty exhausted. And she said, I think we need to let that room after this person died. I think we just need to let it be open and vacant for, a few days than usual, and not fill it up right away. Um, and I just honored that and listened to her. And um, so those are some ways that we support each other. Um, yeah, just listening, writing, drawing. For me, I write poetry, and for me, getting outside, riding my bike and such, it definitely nourishes me.
Yeah, I think that's so important because, it's a beautiful experience, but it's not always an easy experience. And so, especially like I imagine with the person who stayed with you for 102 days, you get attached and you learn more and
Yeah,
more about the person, and there are emotions involved. We're human, and as you start to hear people's stories, I imagine there's some emotional connections that are made. So it's important that you
yeah,
guys are doing those things to protect each other and protect yourselves. And yeah, so
so true. And yeah, it just reminds me of that story, of his story, of that guest. We use the word guest, the one who was with us 102 days. His family was there every day to visit and to check in. He was not unhoused. Um, he had a house, but he just didn't have quite enough support to be able to stay at home. And
mhm.
honestly, I think there is I'm trying to get the right wording here. Families can feel pressure to have their loved one die at home, even if it means that they become exhausted and have to carry the load on themselves and experience financial difficulties and burdens and debts. Some
Yeah,
people still feel they have to do it, or even hurt in their other parts of life, right? Because some people will prioritize caring for their, let's say, their loved one who's dying, but at the expense of their own children or their own wife. It's an extremely painful decision, and people feel that the only option is to do it all, and they don't realize that there are supports. But we were able to be that support to this gentleman and his family, and it. Really kind of hit home, this what I'm describing, because the family didn't have that burden on their shoulders. They could go home and rest. They could have the self care. They could continue their jobs. They could
mhm,
continue their lives without everything being totally interrupted. They could visit as they were able without having to take major sacrifices. Of course, it's still a sacrifice.
right. No,
Um, but they had this home away from home where they knew their loved one was in good care. And when he came to us, we were told he had 2 to 3 days to live.
oh wow,
And we're
and it was
that much
almost
long.
4 months.
Yeah. And actually, that can be distressing both to the
Mm,
person who's dying and to the family,
yeah,
because we start getting ready and we're thinking, okay, it's about to happen. So there's kind of this buildup, and then it doesn't happen. And then we're thinking, okay, maybe it'll be another week. It doesn't happen, maybe another week. And it creates this uh, different type of suffering, a deeper type of suffering of eventually kind of getting to the point of, I want him to go, right? I want him, like, why is he having to be in this space where it's clear like he's not really happy, and why is there more suffering? And our role in the home is just to explain and to support and to let people know that everybody's journey is different, and we don't know what's always going on in the inside of them, but there's something in them that isn't quite resolved and quite ready. And being present and supporting this time and not putting more pressure on them and on ourselves, and just letting it be the journey that it's going to be.
yeah,
That is a strong act of compassion and support, as hard as it is for everybody. And it turned out, actually, in about a week before he died, he was holding on to things. I want to say 2 weeks before he died, um, he disclosed one thing, and then the week after he disclosed another. And they weren't big crimes, they weren't mortal sins. It was things from his childhood that he just had beat himself up about and could never forgive himself about. But he was able to at the very end, and from then he was able to um, enter in and have that dying experience. So if it would have been rushed, it would have,
Yes.
even if it would have looked good on the outside, it wouldn't have been good for him as a person. So, but yeah, we
So,
gave that space and we were able to make that possible. Because yeah, imagine also that family trying to do that. Maybe that family member would have said, "Oh, I can make it work for a week." But
right.
then it turns into 100 days and they're exhausted and their hearts, out of limitedness, aren't able to give, 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 give. And without that fill up, like you were talking about, Heather, that self care aspect, it would have been probably a lot different of an ending, despite him having an amazingly loving and awesome family.
Yeah.
So homes like this are more important than people realize until they start thinking about it. And then
Yeah, and
it's
I
like,
think it's
oh,
yeah, and I think it's something that we don't always think about. And until I found out that I had a family member in hospice and that my friend was supposed to go. Um, it's not something, even though I'm closer to 60 now than 50, it's not something I had thought much about. I have a son on the autism spectrum and I'm a single parent. So I've often thought about, well, what will happen to him when I do go? But I've never really thought about my own end of life situation. And so it's
mm,
important. It's important for us to think about it and to plan for it to a certain degree. Obviously can't plan for everything. And so I'm really, really glad that you took the time and the interest to come and share with our listeners about this, because I do think more people need to start thinking about this end of life experience and to actually live it as opposed to just fear it. And
so
so,
true.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just love the wisdom of what you're saying for sure. It's kind of, I'm trying to think of an example. I guess just what comes to my mind is just, something seems so hard and so difficult, but once we kind of open up to it and let ourselves experience it. Let's say with tasting something new, it's like, oh, I'm hesitant. I haven't had that before. It sounds so gross. And then we taste it, and maybe it's a lot different than what we anticipated. I have a feeling thinking about death is probably like that. The fact that pretty much every religion, I would just say every religion, recommends thinking about our death, and Catholics have this beautiful developed theology and understanding of dying, especially in light of our Lord and of Our Lady, um, that just shines light on that last step of this earthly journey. Um, there's a lot of preparation that we can do for, whether it's an advanced directive, whether it's completing our 5 wishes, which was developed by Catholics, inspired by Mother Teresa, actually, the 5 wishes, or finding a death doula and starting that conversation with them. Death doulas or end of life doulas, they're more than just doulas that help at the very end. They can help actually much earlier with digging into this conversation. They can help identify areas that we haven't planned for and questions that we haven't asked, and help us to get a bit deeper into it. And of course, our priests. I just listened to a podcast, an actual Orthodox priest. Um, was it 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? And he recommended um, that people start having this conversation with their priest earlier or sooner rather than later. If somebody has a terminal diagnosis and maybe a week to live, it's maybe not actually too late, but in a way it is, because there's so much that can be done to get ready for the dying instead of waiting until that very last moment. I mean, one of the obvious things is regular confession, right?
Yes.
Um, but then there's a lot of other things of confessing those memories that we're beating up ourselves about. Maybe we haven't intentionally held it back, but we're still like not quite through it, or even a therapist if we need to, but a priest can help kind of guide through. And also they can start supporting family. And definitely once that terminal diagnosis comes in, the priest should be contacted right away, not only for the anointing, not only for that last confession, or what's known as last rites sometimes, but
Mhm.
for that spiritual support, both for the family and for the person dying in that presence. One visit by a priest at the end can be kind of insufficient, and it doesn't let that person tap into the riches that could be available to them spiritually. Talking about living or dying, that priest can help it be a fully lived experience instead of a quick, oh, get your last rites, I'm out of here type of thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
mhm.
Oh, excellent. And you have answered my last two questions about finding beauty in our suffering. I think your stories illustrated it so well. But I always ask about warrior words. Any advice that you would have to give, and you just gave us some really good tactical things that we can do, but I wonder if you have anything specific that you would want to share with somebody who is, who maybe is afraid, or who maybe doesn't know how to go about um, finding a home like yours, because not all of our listeners would be in Albuquerque, unfortunately. So, what would you advise to somebody who's maybe right there and needs to actually make that decision?
Yeah, so somebody right in that end, or caring for somebody in the end of this earthly journey,
Hmm.
I would just say, be patient with yourself and don't try to do it all yourself. Find community, let people in. Don't reject somebody's offer to help or somebody's phone call. Don't deny the opportunity to get out of the home and let somebody else do the care. To give yourself that time and that space, because you'll be better for your loved one, as you do take care of yourself. And in a bigger way too, look and see if there is a home in the Omega Home Network near you, or if there are end of life doulas that might be able to come in and support. Um, Not all end of life doulas share our value regarding pro life to the end of life and honoring natural death. So be aware of that. But by you presenting that and saying these are our values, they will respect it, from my experience. So, and they are definitely a helpful resource. So warrior words are, um, to everybody else, I would say, is don't be afraid to think of dying. Don't be afraid to prepare for dying, and don't wait to prepare for dying. We don't know when the Lord could call us. It could be today, or it could be years from now. But either way, try to live your life ready for that day, right? Try to live ready for the hour of death. As you pray the rosary, this is front and center. We say it so often and repetitively. So let that sink in as you pray it, and
Yes.
think of Mary at the foot of the cross. Mary will be there for you. And then see if there's people who are around you that can be there for you too, physically, like we started with. So that's what comes to my mind, Heather.
Well, beautiful words to those who are in that end stage, and those who care for them, and even those who aren't there yet but need to start thinking about it. So,
Mhm.
so thank you, Miles. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story, and then the story of others who have experienced living their dying. And I'm very, very grateful for your willingness to come on and share.
It's been good. Thanks for giving me this space and letting me share. Um, yeah, like you said, it's different, but you were open to it, and I think the Lord will use this conversation. So.
I pray that he does. And one other thing that I would like to ask you is you've shared about your home, but can you share where people can find you and learn more about the actual home and what you do?
Yes, absolutely. They can find me, they can find Inhora at inhora.org. That's INHORA.org. And from there, you can even sign up for a newsletter, you can make a donation, you can contact me and ask those hard questions that you haven't been able to ask. Feel free to reach out to me about those. Um, and then you can find us on Facebook too, Inhora Home. So facebook.com/Inhora Home. We're also on Instagram with an underscore Inhora_home. If that's of interest to your listeners too.
And I'll put the links directly in the show notes so that people can click on them and come check you out. So thank you again. This was enlightening and chill inducing and tear inducing, and it was just a beautiful conversation. So I thank you for your time, and glad we got to chat.
With you too, Heather, and I look forward to staying in touch too.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Living our dying. How many of us have thought about the end of our lives or our loved ones' lives in this way? Or how many of us have thought about the end of our lives at all? When we think about being pro-life, many of us think about abortion. But being pro-life means we support life from conception through natural death. What Miles, his staff, and his volunteers are doing is supporting life through people's natural death. Supporting life at the hour of death. They pray for people. They help alleviate pain. They connect with them and their families where possible. They provide a bed, a real bed, and food. They offer compassion, companionship, and community, all without the insurance red tape and bills sent to the family's home. Now, I mentioned Matthew 25 during the episode, and I'd like to share a small part of that here. Verse 35, "For I was hungry, and you gave me to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me to drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and you covered me. Sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." This is what's happening at Inhora. And I encourage you, check out their website or visit them on Facebook or Instagram and see what they're doing. See the life and the dignity that they are sharing. And then think about your own end-of-life plans and those of your loved ones. How can you live out Matthew 25, 35, and 36? And if you want to help Miles and Inhora in their mission to help people live their dying, feel free to hit their donation button. And that's something to think about this week. Until we meet again, armor up, fight the good fight, seek beauty, and make your words warrior words. God bless.